Thank you very much for joining me today. I think that everybody who knows even a little bit about you knows what an amazing and inspiring life you've lived. So I've just finished reading your new book, Pilgrimage for Peace, having also read No Destination. And I kind of wanted to see if we could talk about, obviously mainly there's going to be the new book, but also there's a bit of flesh on either side, which would be quite nice to sort of dip into for a bit of background to that, if that's okay.
Lovely.
So one of the things that sort of struck me is that, obviously the Pilgrimage for Peace, for those who don't know, is based on your journey around the world in 1962, or from 1962 to 64, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
With your friend, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Is it Menon?
My friend was called E.P. Menon.
So that amazing journey where you went to try and promote peace to the nuclear capitals of the world at that time. Obviously, there's since been a few extra nuclear capitals of the world added. But not only is that an amazing journey to have undertaken of, I think it was about 8,000 miles on foot.
That's right.
But also the fact to do it without any money is quite an incredible feat. And I know that you've sort of had this this sort of background, obviously, of a fairly sort of arduous start to life. But I'm really interested to know as well what it was if you know that first moment when you felt that inner call to adventure, that sort of, so not just for this particular adventure, but when you felt that call to make your life into a journey.
Yes. I mean, to some extent, my spiritual journey is inherited from my mother. From my mother, I learned to be a pilgrim, because the attitude of a pilgrim is different from an attitude of a tourist. Tourist goes everywhere expecting things in a particular way. Pilgrim goes anywhere and everywhere without any expectations, just accepting things as they come. And that was one reason that I decided to walk around the world without any money. Because when you have no money, then you can't expect anything to happen in any way. So you accept things as they happen. I think it's a very Zen mind, that no expectations, only acceptance. So my mother was very much, although she lived a worldly life, she had 8 children, she had a farm, and my father died when he was about 50. My mother was maybe 45. And so from 45 to 80, when my mother died, all those 35 years, she lived like a pilgrim, a very spiritual person. And I became a Jain monk because when I saw my father dead, I did not know what was happening and why he was talking to me, why he was not walking, why everybody was crying, my mother, my sisters, my family, all crying. And so I was wondering what has happened to him. And when my mother said that your father is dead, I didn't know what that meant. And that means that he's no longer going to talk with you, no longer going to walk with you, no longer going to be around us. And so I said, will that happen to everybody? Will you die one day? And my mother said, yes, I will die one day, and then you won't see me anymore. Then will I die one day? Yes, you will die, and people will cry for you too. So that was quite a shocking dialogue with my mother at age 4. I was 4 years old. You can say that what can 4 years old understand? But I remember even now. And so that eventually led me to become a Jain monk, because Jain monks said to me that in order to be free of the cycle of birth and death, you have to renounce the world and you have to live a pure and spiritual life, so that all your karmas, all your bondage melts away and you become pure, and therefore no reason for you to come back in the world. And so to bring an end to the cycle of birth and death, you have to renounce the world. And so I said, I will do anything to bring an end to the death. And so that's how I became a Jain monk. So in a way, being a Jain monk is also being a pilgrim. And so for 9 years, I was walking bare feet.
It's incredible.
No train, no car, no plane, and no money. And so for 9 years, I walked bare feet from village to village, town to town, home to home, with a begging bowl, very much like a Zen monk. I think Zen monks and Jain monks are very close to each other in their spirit, although traditions are very different, but the spirit is very similar. And so for 9 years, I was a Jain monk. And so my pilgrimage started when I was 9 years old. Right. And so I consider myself a lifelong pilgrim, because I accept what comes to my life and in my life, and I expect nothing. And I'm never disappointed because I don't expect anything. So that's a kind of Zen mind.
Yeah, wonderful. Because it's I think in No Destination, you also mentioned that your mother actually went to see the village astrologer, and it was almost like your destiny was laid out very accurately before her.
That's right. That's right.
It's incredible.
I mean, there are some very good experienced astrologers, very knowledgeable in Indian tradition. And so they actually knew that I'm not going to be a worldly man. I'm not going to follow my father's and brother's business, yeah, and stay home. So he already predicted to my mother. And so that was it.
Wow. So, but do you still think that the Jain monastic philosophy of renouncing the world or worldly goods, do you still think that that's entirely accurate, or do you think that's necessary?
No, I have changed a bit of perception, and I believe that now, world and the other world, there is no difference, there is no distinction. And renunciation is not so much external as internal. It's a renunciation of attachment, renunciation of clinging, craving, holding on, ego, possessiveness, thinking that this is my home, this is my job, this is my prestige, it's my name, it's my money, it's my family, it's my body. Everything, this possessiveness and attachment and grasping and clinging to your life and your worldly possessions, that is actually worldliness. And the moment you let go of your ego and your cravings and your attachment and your possessiveness, that is a letting go. So it's actually the spirit Jains also have, but of course they also renounce the external worldly goods as well. But for me now, it's more important to renounce the attachment and craving and grasping and possessiveness than actual goods, because world is world and it's not yours and not anybody else's. It's itself, belongs to itself. And therefore, I don't think in those terms now that you have to renounce the world. You can be in the world and still not in the world. You can be like a duck in water. It's in the water, but it never gets wet. So you can be in the world and yet remain detached and in a way kind of, you love the world without being attached to the world.
Yeah. Was that, so do you think that's why, was that the sort of core reason why you perhaps left the monastic path?
That's true. That's true. Absolutely. That was the thing. And in a way, I was a little bit more influenced by Mahatma Gandhi at that stage. And I left the monastic order to think that I can practice compassion, kindness, generosity, love, non-violence, truth, all these things, non-attachment, all these things in the world and make the world a beautiful place. Because how many people can renounce the world and live in a monastic order? Only a few, a few hundred, few thousand, maybe tens of thousands, but there are 7 billion people in the world today. And so 7 billion people can't live in the monastic order. So somebody has to grow food, somebody has to make clothes, somebody has to build houses, somebody has to do something. So all those things have to be done. So this exclusivity of monkhood, I thought was not quite the right way for me. And therefore, if some people want to experiment, continue to experiment as a monk life, that's fine. I'm not against it. But for me, I would like to experiment something to be in the world, make the world a beautiful place, and not be of the world and not be attached to the world.
Yeah, because it's I think that it's a lovely thing if you've decided that that's your path to become a monk. I do think that there is a place for that in the world. But as you say, I mean, there are so many of us that, I mean, if we're going to make real change in the world, then, because a lot of what you talk about in your books relates to that sort of personal responsibility for peace.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, that search for inner peace, you know, if we can get 8 billion people to start to look for peace within their own hearts, even a little bit, you know, it's going to be a more powerful effect on the world than a few people who achieve it to the fullest degree.
Absolutely. But even that, what you just said is wonderful. But even that is also a process, a pilgrimage. It is not a destination. Peace is not a destination. Spirituality is not a destination. Compassion is not a destination. It's a process, it's a journey. And we are on the way. All the time, we are along the journey. There's no time when you can say that now 7 billion people have reached a state of peace and compassion and kindness and enlightenment. There is no such state. The enlightenment is also a way, a process, a journey, a pilgrimage. So we are all pilgrims on that path. And all the time we are discovering new things. And until we die, we are searching for peace within and peace in the world. And so this is a journey, it's a pilgrimage, it's a process.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, I know, I don't want this to sound like it's an attachment that you might have, but when you look back at that sort of decisive moment, I think when you were about 18 and you met up in Bangalore with your friend and you were reading the newspaper, or he was, and you saw that Bertrand Russell had been imprisoned for disturbing the peace, as they called it, you know, for a peaceful protest that was supposedly disturbing the peace against nuclear weapons. You felt really inspired, I think, to begin this big adventure. And when you look back on that, do you sort of, because that's such a seminal moment in your life, do you sort of look back? How do you feel when you look back at that? Does it?
I mean, I feel that was a kind of inspired moment. And when Bertrand Russell, at age 90, was prepared to go to jail for peace in the world, I felt at that time, what am I doing, young man, sitting here in a cafe, drinking coffee, when a 90-year-old man is working hard for peace and bringing peace in the world by going to jail and sacrificing himself. So that was such a kind of pivotal moment, an inspiring moment. And I still remember that moment of excitement, but also at the moment of challenge, that what can I do? Because at that time, I did not know what going around the world meant. And when I decided to walk around the world, it was only an idea. and what it would involve, and what were the difficulties, and what were the hardships, and what were the ups and downs, and what were the joy of it, and the pain of it. I did not know anything. It was just an idea. And I said, well, nevertheless, whatever happens, I will do it. I want to do it.
Because you went and saw your obviously very experienced teacher Vinoba, wasn't it?
Yes.
Who
Yes.
spent a lot of time working for sort of social justice in India and
Yes.
land reform.
Yeah.
And so, obviously he was somebody who you hugely respected.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when you went for his blessing, I loved the fact that he gave you weapons for your journey,
Yes.
as he called them. And,
Yeah.
I presume that they were, they must have been, how they turned out to be so important, I imagine, on your journey. I mean, he was clearly very
Absolutely. Absolutely.
wise.
Vinoba was running a great movement for social reform and land reform. He was asking landlords to give land for the poor. And he collected 4 million acres of land in donations and gifts. And that was a very spiritual movement. It was not a political movement. It was there. It was not a social movement, although social justice was there. It was inspired by the spirit. And it was a spiritual movement of compassion, of donation, of gift economy. So it's all very spiritual values. And therefore, him saying to us that you go without any money in your pocket, that will mean that when you are walking for peace, you are being peace. You are not just talking about peace, but you are being peace. Because when you have money, you go to a restaurant and eat. And when you have money, you go to a B&B or a guest house to sleep. You don't need anybody. And when you have no money, you have to trust. You have to trust. And peace comes from trust.
Yeah.
War comes from fear. So if you have no fear in your heart and you trust people, if that you can demonstrate, then you are being what you are talking about. So you are embodiment of peace by having no money. So that was his idea. And I, in a way, I said that I was a monk for 9 years and I lived without money. But at the same time, I was in India. In India, there's a tradition of monks going from village to village begging for food. And there was many Jain followers. They will give you food. They are waiting for you to receive their food. So it's different. But I'm going to Muslim countries, communist countries, Christian countries, capitalist countries, poor countries, rich countries, unknown languages, unknown countries, unknown people. How am I going to survive? At that time, the spirit of being a pilgrim comes very strong and very powerful, that I trust. I do not worry. If I have no money and I have no food and I have no shelter, still I don't worry. I will go and I will just trust that something will happen. And if I die, I die. Even I have no fear of death. So that kind of spirit of embodying peace rather than just talking about peace became necessary in order to do this pilgrimage for peace.
And I love that, because I love the fact that when you first, fairly early on, when you got to the border between India and Pakistan, the lady friend of yours came and gave you food because she was caught up in that sense of concern for you, that
Yes.
you were, potentially going into a country with different religious and political, there was at odds with India in many ways, Pakistan,
exactly.
that you weren't going to be treated well and you needed some food. And yet, even at that early stage, you set that that determination to say, I trust, I act out of trust, I will go without food.
Exactly, yeah. My friend said that you are going to a Muslim country, Pakistan, which is an enemy country, and to survive, you must take some food at least for a few days. And I said, if I don't get food, I will fast. That will be my opportunity to fast. If I don't get shelter, I will sleep under the stars. And that'll be my 1,000,000-star hotel. But that moment was a very kind of pivotal moment, not to waver, not to diverge from the commitment which I made to Vinoba, that I will go without money and I will go as a vegetarian and I will trust. So that was a very beautiful moment that my friend came to me with the food and I did not take it. That was a very kind of a gracious moment.
Yeah. I think that what strikes me at that sort of stage in the journey is, you've been given those weapons of the sword of no money and the shield of vegetarianism, as your ways of traveling, and you've taken that first sort of test of your willingness to believe in the journey, and you've passed that test. And it's at that point in the journey, it really started to turn from being what one might think of the book as being a sort of amazing adventure or travelogue into a hero's journey. It really is a hero's journey. And it has that universality to it, where you're putting yourself in the way of danger, and you are relying on your wits and on your trust to survive and to make a difference to the people you meet on the way.
I mean, eventually, sometimes in the beginning, people were wondering why somebody should go without money and why somebody should go on foot when they want to go to Moscow and Paris and London and Washington. There are better ways to go, an easier way to go. You can fly, you can go by train, you can go by car, you can do many things. And lots of people at that time in the 60s were hitchhiking and traveling. And there was a kind of trail of hippies and trail of pilgrims, Europe to India. And so I was going backwards from India to Europe, but there was a lot of the cars, lots of trains. But I said, if you take things easy, that is not the way to peace. You have to make your journey a bit difficult. If I went by train and car or aeroplane, that would be too easy. And that will not be a pilgrimage. And then if I had lots of money, I stayed in good hotels, I eat in good restaurants, and no problem. That is too easy. And if I'm not vegetarian, I eat meat. That's everywhere you can get that food. But if I have no money, no meat eating, and only walking, that makes the pilgrimage difficult. And because it's difficult, it is more interesting and more joyful and more spiritual, more pilgrimage, rather than a traveling or rather than being a tourist. So I'm not a peace tourist. I'm a peace
Definitely not a peace tourist, no.
No.
No, I mean, it also, though, strikes me because you talk about, that development of peace within. And of course, to as you describe peace as being the journey, peace is the way. That if you were to fly, and obviously I know that at certain points in the journey, you were moved by aeroplane across Russia, but through no choice of your own. But it was quite evident that you really missed what you wanted, which was the communication with the people on the ground, with the everyday man and woman in the street, which of course may have been what the sort of more controlling Soviet government did want.
People I met were amazing, ordinary people of no particular credential in the villages, in small rural areas, in the factories, on the farms. People I met were amazing. This one or two women I met in tea factory near Black Sea, just ordinary woman, mother of two children, and she read my leaflet and said, "Have you really walked all the way from India? Is that really true?" "Yes, we have, so many months." "Oh, and without money, how do you eat?" I said, "People give us food." She said, "Are you hungry? It's a lunchtime. Are you hungry? We will give you food. I work in this tea factory and we have a very nice canteen. Come and have some tea with us. Are you hungry?" I said, "All right, tea, any time is tea time." And so we will go. And Georgia produces good wine and good tea, like Indian tea, the Georgian tea. And so, and the Black Sea is a very beautiful kind of weather and very beautiful season, very beautiful landscape. And so they say, some hilly areas, Caucasus Mountains. We went in and we started to have a tea. And suddenly she had a kind of brainwave. She went out of the room and came back with 4 packets of tea. And I wondered what she was doing. And she said, "These 4 packets I have brought are not for you." "For whom are they?" She said, You are walking to Moscow, Paris, London, Washington. I can't go there, but you are going. As you say, if it's true you are going, I want you to do one thing. What should I do? She said, take these 4 packets of tea with you. These packets of tea are not packets of tea. They are packets of peace tea. And give one to our premier in the Kremlin, and second to President of France in Palais Élysée, third to the Prime Minister of England or Britain in 10 Downing Street, and a 4th packet to the President of the United States of America in the White House. And please give them a message for me. Wow, what is your message? My message to them is that if you ever get a mad thought of pressing the nuclear button, please stop for a moment and have a fresh cup of tea. This is no ordinary tea. This is a cup of peace tea. And that will give you a moment to reflect that your bombs will not only kill your enemies, but they will kill every man, woman, child, worker, farmer, animal, birds, trees, fish, water, lake, everything will be destroyed. So nuclear weapons are not, just can you imagine a small village factory, tea factory, an ordinary woman having such a thought like Bertrand Russell, like any great philosopher, any great saint. She was an ordinary woman. This is why I said, you don't have to be a monk or live in a monastery. She was a really spiritual pilgrim, earth pilgrim, or a spiritual peace pilgrim in a tea factory. And she said to me that give these packets of peace tea to 4 nuclear powers of the world. That kind of meeting could never happen if I went by aeroplane,
no,
or I went by car or by train and went to Moscow and had a meeting with Khrushchev or whoever the leader is, and then went to America and met the president of America. That could never happen. An ordinary woman giving you this kind of message. So this is the magic of walking every day in a rural areas, in ordinary villages, and meeting ordinary people every day and finding the extraordinary nature of ordinary people.
Because you also said that, I think that the fact that you have no money gives people the opportunity to express gratitude, to express generosity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. People gave me shoes, people gave me clothes. When the winter came, they gave me coat, they gave me hat, they gave me jumpers, they gave me everything, whatever I needed. People say, oh, you are walking for peace. Please, what do you need? Do you need a haircut? Do you need shoes, new shoes? What do you need? People will give you. Generosity of strangers was quite amazing.
It struck me in the book, but I don't want to be judgmental of anybody, but it did strike me in the book that almost the people who had the least were the most generous, and the ones who had more or were more stuck in their ways were more resistant to generosity.
That's right. The poor people know that they can survive only by sharing.
Yeah.
Because nobody has too much. Everybody has something little, and so we all have to share to survive. So rich people think that everybody is rich, and they all have. Why they need anything from me? Why don't you stay in a hotel? Why don't you stay in a guest house? Why don't you eat in a restaurant? Why do you have no money? Can we give you money if you want? But as a poor have more hospitality. They know that other people, they don't know the idea of staying in a hotel. They only know the staying in a home and having hospitality. So I depended totally on the generosity of the strangers.
It does make you somewhat think, I believe, that the way of our materialistic society, where we aim to accumulate as much stuff as we can to we believe make us happy, seems such a sort of erroneous path, because it gets in the way of being able to sort of relate to other human beings.
Yes, absolutely. And what we need is basics.
Yeah.
We need food, we need clothes, we need basic shelter. And that is nature provides. Nature is abundant. When you plant one seed has the potential to become an orchard. is a wonderful nature. Nature provides everything. So out of fear, we accumulate.
Yeah.
Out of fear, we want to hold and possess because we don't know what will happen tomorrow. But nature is always regenerative. Nature is always producing food. Every spring, there is a new crop, and every summer and every autumn, there's a new fruit ripening and the crops ripening. And so nature is regenerative, whereas the humans are holding because they think in their fear that we don't know what will happen next year. Will we get food? We will get what will happen to us. So we live in fear, but nature has no fear.
Yeah. It's interesting as you say that, because that sort of that trust, that generosity of spirit is very evident throughout the book. But the other thing that I also noticed is that you have this amazing capacity for gratitude as well. So, and I don't just mean to the things that you were given that were helpful, but even being grateful for any experience, you know, with that spirit of equanimity, you looked upon every experience as being something worthy of gratitude. And I imagine that positivity really helped carry you through those sort of tougher times.
I mean, even the person who, in a way, you can say, kind of cheated us by taking us from Sochi to Moscow. And even though he wanted us not to walk in Russia, he did not want us to spread this idea of nonviolence and nuclear disarmament in a unilateral way and all those things. And even he was so kind of human and hospitable and kind and organizing everything, all the things he organized. So I have to express gratitude even there. So gratitude is not only for those who are good to you. That's easy. But gratitude even to those who are not good to you, who are not acting as you want them to act, who are not kind to you, and you are not being favorable to you. When there's a negative condition and there's an opposite condition, at that time, gratitude and the spirit of gratitude is more important and more necessary. So I have tried to be kind of grateful even in those conditions when situations were not right for me or not favorable to me.
And was that something that you sort of, I mean, I'm guessing that that was a sort of innate quality within you, probably from childhood, but is it something that grew as you traveled on the journey, do you think? I
think it grew. It grew. I mean, every child, potentially every child has the gratitude.
Yeah.
You don't have to go to a school or college to learn gratitude. You don't have to go to a shopping mall to buy a gratitude. Gratitude is ingrained in every soul, in every spirit. But some, like seed, some soil, some conditions, some situations facilitate that seed to grow, and other conditions become impediment in growing of that seed. And so I would say I was very fortunate that my seed of gratitude in my heart found fertile soil and fertile conditions. Therefore, with my Jain tradition, born with gratitude, but some people's gratitude does not grow and they become kind of trampled, or they remain dormant and they don't flourish. But I was very fortunate that my gratitude has grown, and I am deeply grateful, and I feel gratitude all the time.
It's a wonderful quality it's a much happier way of living life, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, even after being imprisoned in France, you looked on the positive side of how you were following in the footsteps of your hero, or one of your heroes, Bertrand Russell. You know, you were emulating his actions unintentionally, but
yeah. And the thing is that when I feel gratitude even to those who imprisoned me, because without that difficulty or without that hardship, I will not grow. Hardship and difficulty makes you grow and makes you mature. And so everything went right, and nothing happened, nothing hardship, no difficulty came. That will not make me grow. So I welcome difficulties. I welcome my imprisonment. I welcome sometimes when I was hungry, sometimes I was rejected, sometimes I was blistered, sometimes I was tired in the snow, in the deserts, in the mountains, all those difficulties, I welcome them. I think difficulties make you stronger and more mature.
Was there actually, sort of always intrigued me whether there was any moment during some of those extremely arduous aspects of the journey or stages of the journey. So when I think back to, was it about 35 hours you walked through the salt deserts of Iran?
That's right.
Without any food or shelter.
No food, no shelter.
Or the sandstorm was that
Herat.
Herat
in Afghanistan, Herat.
Yeah, I mean, when you could have been close to death if you hadn't had the Sufi guide who took you.
Absolutely.
Were there any moments when you sort of, in those, all the sort of snowstorms in the sort of Siberian winds blowing across Russia, were there any stages where you sort of thought, I think I've made a mistake here?
There was one time, it was more in Afghanistan, when I was going high, about 10, 12,000 feet high mountains, and going up and down, up and down, up and down, and I had blisters. My feet were bleeding and I was hungry, because in Afghanistan, being a vegetarian, you get nothing but bread and tea, nothing else. Everything they eat is with meat, and particularly in those days. And therefore, I did think, am I making a mistake? Is it worth doing? Shouldn't I go back home? I said to my friend, I want to go back home and sleep in my bed and not be in these mountains. So that did happen. And that's a human. I am a human. And so that did happen. But my friend at that time was very good. And he said, oh, don't worry, go to sleep, you rest, in the morning you will be fine. And so that's how it happened.
That's what friends are for, isn't it? I mean, and it is one of those, it would be hard to imagine that you didn't have any of those moments, because
it was a very good, I was very fortunate to have very good companion.
Yeah.
He was always wonderful, and we never fell out. 2.5 years, he gave me tremendous support, tremendous friendship, and always encouragement, always supporting. So I was very fortunate to have a very good companion in my journey.
Yeah.
And I think when you are traveling on a long journey of 2.5 years, walking for 8,000 miles, it's very important to have a good companion with you. So I think I was good companion to him, and he was good companion to me. We were supporting each other. When he fell down, I supported him. When I was feeling down, he supported me.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Because so you've got the friendships there that friendship was so central to the whole thing. But I also struck by how that synchronicity of the journey. I suppose the things that set you off on the journey that go full circle. So I think you mentioned how when you were in the mountains of Afghanistan, you met the American Quaker who basically said, "Where are you going? Do you want a lift?" And you said, "We're going to America," which is hard to believe. But that you ended up going and visiting in America when
That's right. It was actually in Khyber Pass, which is just before Afghanistan, on the border of Afghanistan. And this American said that, "Don't you want a lift? We are going to Kabul, we take you there." He said, "No, we are not going to Kabul. We are going to the United States of America." And when he said, he was an American, he was a Quaker from America, he said, "Do you know where America is?" And I said, "Sir, we have never been there. We have seen it on the map. And as Columbus discovered America by boat, we would like to discover America on foot." And so he was very amused and said, "All right, here's my card. And please, if you make to America, call me. I want to see whether you have discovered America on foot." And so I said, "That's good. We'll keep your card safely." So I kept that card safely. And when after nearly 2 years, more than 2 years, we arrived in New York, and we walked from New York to Washington. And on the way, we arrived in Philadelphia, where this Quaker lived, Dr. Scarf. And I rang him, And he said, wow, you have discovered America on foot. And he kept us in his house for 2 days and invited his Quaker friends and many other friends and speak about peace, tell them about our journey and our stories. That was an amazing experience.
Yeah. That's wonderful, isn't it? I mean, but you had, yeah, I mean, you had a couple of other things that went full circle as well. So you had Bertrand Russell had in the first instance inspired you to do this very journey, and when you got to England, you ended up going and visiting him, and him sort of crowdfunding you ferry tickets to America as well, didn't you?
That's right. That's right. That's a kind of a good things around. And the thing is that when we met Bertrand Russell, he was truly inspiring. Although he was more kind of fearful of war, whereas we were talking about peace as a positive way of life. Nevertheless, he, even at age 92 by that time, tremendously active. And he was on call with the prime ministers around the world, presidents around the world. And he was saying that we have to take care of our planet Earth, and we have to take care of our... And I said, you are absolutely right. And I totally agree with you. And we have to make peace with nature as well. That I added something to Bertrand Russell's thinking. And I said, because not only we have to make peace with people, humans, we also have to make peace with forests and mountains and oceans and animals and birds. All, because in my book, I say that for me to make peace, we have to think that whole cosmos is our country. Whole earth is our home. Nature is our family, and love is our religion. That is the kind of big consciousness and big mind and big heart that we need to make peace. Peace is not only just among humans, because humans are not separate from... We are as much part of nature. We are as much part of mountains and forests and oceans, because we are all made of earth, air, fire, water. We are all one. This unity of life, without understanding and recognizing this unity of life, we cannot just make peace with people and among nations. Our lack of peace happens among nations because we feel separation. We feel separation from nature. Then Americans feel separation from Russians. Russians feel separation from Europeans. Indians feel separation from Chinese or Pakistanis. Hindus feel separation from Muslims. So all this kind of separation leads to lack of peace. When we feel a sense of unity, one humanity, one earth, one future, we are all together. So making peace with nature, making peace with people, and making peace within yourself are all part of one big story. And that's what I spoke to Bertrand Russell.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it's becoming even more. I mean, that's almost 60 years ago. Yeah. And we now really see that, I mean, obviously you were sort of marching for peace in its sort of outer form as being sort of anti-nuclear element, but now 60 years on, we're seeing how much we're dependent on the environment and how much we're really messing things up. Have been for so long. And again, that's another element of that separateness, that materialism that I can have. Has
the thing is that messing up with the planet is causing climate change. And therefore, humanity is more or less sort of at war with nature. And the way we are destroying our rainforests, and the way we are treating animals in factory farms, and the way we are polluting our oceans with plastic, and causing carbon emission in the atmosphere. All those are acts of war with nature.
Yeah,
we have to make peace with nature as much as peace with people.
It's a wonderful, wonderful promotional sort of thing. I think that's something we all need to get behind far more and far more quickly as well.
Yes.
Because the other thing that I sort of just strikes me as well is that, when we talk about equanimity, your ability to develop that attitude towards things in life. But I can't help but wonder whether there was a little bit of extra glee in those highlight moments that you had, like, for example, so going back to the sort of full circle thing I think it was 1960 or 1959, that Martin Luther King came to Vinoba's ashram, and you met him
Yes,
there,
that's
and
right.
then you met him in his
Again,
home in America, which
that's right.
must have been
That's
an
right.
amazing experience.
Yeah. I mean, when Martin Luther King came to India and met Vinoba, I only had kind of 2-3 minutes with Martin Luther King, and I was so moved and inspired by his very presence. He was like a kind of dynamic, young, radical thinker. But when I went to America, just before going to America, I heard his speech in August 1963, which he gave from Lincoln Memorial. I have a dream speech. And so when I arrived in America, I said, one thing I want to do is to meet Martin Luther King, who I have met before, but as my highlight of my journey, my pilgrimage, maybe the highlight.
Yeah.
And so I wrote to him, and he answered immediately by return of post through Indian Embassy. And then I went and met him, truly an embodiment of love. He said, love is our way of life. Non-violence is a way of life. Non-violence is not only a way to protest against racism, colonialism, imperialism, sexism, all those things, but non-violence has to be part of everyday living. And so that kind of profound philosophy and profound thinking coming from that kind of, still quite young, under 40 or something, he was quite young, and still that kind of profound wisdom that he had, that was, I would say that was truly the highlight of my whole 2.5 years journey.
Wow. I'm sure. I mean, so many amazing things, but yeah, that probably capped it off, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But if I can ask you one last question, because I'm conscious of how the time's going on for you, but if all those people who read your book get inspired, as I have, to want
this
to
is my
actually...
book.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. So if all those people who read that, and I think it's available from, pretty much every good bookseller out there.
Yes.
Along with a whole load of other books you've written as well, which I think I'm looking forward to delving into some more of those soon. One last question about a word of advice from you for all those people that are actually inspired by that sort of hero's journey, because I think that it does touch something within all of us, that sense of, an inner calling to want to do something of purpose, of meaning, something in our lives that isn't just a sleepful state of walking on the treadmill, something that enlivens our spirits and makes life really worthwhile. And yet an awful lot of people, don't actually really know how to express that in their lives, how to find their own path. I just wonder if you have any words of wisdom you can share.
As you said, I made this journey from India to America 60 years ago, or 58 years ago, or 62, so 59 years ago. And why, you can ask, I wrote this book now. I wrote it because I feel, especially for young people, that they need to, in their young age, in their 20s or whatever, they need to take risk in life. They need to do something which is their ideal, what they aspire for. And I wanted them to be inspired by my story. So I especially wrote this book for the young people. And young people like Amanda Gorman, who is an American Black poet. She was invited to read poetry at the inauguration of Joe Biden. And that is a kind of young, 22-year-old Black poet, Greta Thunberg from Sweden. She is a young Swedish girl. There are hundreds of thousands of young people around the world, very inspired to do something for their values and ideals, and something more than for themselves, and seek a job for themselves, or seek success for themselves, or seek big money or big house for themselves. So I want them to be inspired by my book. by reading this, that they can do something, even if it's hard, difficult, but adventurous, risky. If I could do it, anybody can do it. It's not something very special. And so just take that courage. And so I wrote this book for the young people. And I don't have any recipe for anybody. Everybody has to find their own vocation. Everybody has to find what is their adventure. Greta Thunberg sitting in front of Swedish Parliament was her action. And that way she managed to be what she is. In the same way, many, many other young people can do it. But do something. Be an activist. Do not just think that, oh, something will happen. I can't do anything. Do not feel that you cannot do something. All of us can make some contribution for the betterment of the world. And that is the reason I wrote this book after 59 years. And I hope that particularly young people can be inspired by this book to do something in their life.
And I think that it's probably safe to say that anybody, whatever stage they're at in life, can look within and seek to live a life that is more peaceful, more loving, more sharing, and more giving to those that are around them. Even if it's not a big gesture, just actually living a life that is beautiful in its simplicity is something that we can all do that makes a difference.
Yeah, I 100% ditto that.
Thank you. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to speak to you, Satish. I really
thank you for your time, and thank you for interviewing me. And it's my pleasure to speak with you. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All the best.